Welcome to Totally Talent Podcast by HR.com, your go-to source for all things talent. Whether you're looking for expert insights on high-volume hiring, the latest trends in recruitment technology, or strategies for building a winning team, we've got you covered. Join us for each episode as we dive deep into the challenges and opportunities shaping the talent landscape today. Let's get started.
Welcome, everybody, to Totally Talent on HR.com. I'm your host, Mike Wood, and I have the Gerry Crispin here with me today. Hi, Gerry. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Life is good. It's we're into the holidays, and it couldn't get better than that.
So, Gerry, just if in case people don't really know a little bit about your background, like what's your elevator pitch of like who you are in the industry?
My elevator pitch is that I'm probably one of the oldest students, but a lifelong student of hiring. That's how I would describe myself, and I support a community, Career Crossroads, of about close to 100 employers. And we're supporting the talent acquisition function within that as a community. So the whole issue is, how do peers engage one another in a way that's constructive, supportive in the short and long term? And so those are requirements I have for members. It's a member-driven kind of community. And there's probably about 3,000 people in those 100 companies who participate in some way, shape, or form. And over the course of a year, those companies collectively probably hire between 2 and 3 million people.
Wow. All right. Well, I've long seen you at different events and stuff. You show up at RecFest with your Airstream, which is awesome. One of these days, because we don't have actual like food there, it's food trucks. I would love to prank your Airstream by just putting like a hot dog sign on it or something. all these attendees come by looking for food. But we caught up at RecFest a couple months ago, and you have been the person that's been sounding the alarm, as far as I've seen, about the weight of this Mobley Workday discrimination case. And so let's just like lay out, what is this Mobley discrimination case with Workday, and how can it affect hiring? It can affect everything.
First of all, there's a number of folks out there that have been pretty active over a 3-year period in dealing with that. Steve Levy comes to mind as one of them, but there's several others that really have been following this case, and obviously lawyers are following it, et cetera. So, to get into it, let's imagine that there's this poor guy named Mobley.
Yeah.
And what he did was he was out of work. He felt that he was a pretty good guy, somewhere between finance and IT. He had skills, etc. And he applied to literally hundreds of companies. But let's talk about 100 companies that he recorded that he applied to, and never went anywhere. And here's what happened. In the middle of one night, he, like 1 o'clock in the morning, 12:55, he applies to a company that looks like a perfect fit for him. And at 1 o'clock exactly, 5 minutes after he presses submit, he gets rejected. Now, if you've recruited at all in your life, you know that there are some things that you probably have defaulted on or should have worked on. One of them is the amount of time that your system takes to respond to a query, if you will, that you know is not going forward. It might be something as innocuous as, this person physically has indicated that they are in San Francisco and the job is in New York, and we're not going to bother engaging with anyone who is not within a commute range. And I'm not talking about whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying You should have told the computer not to respond instantly.
Yeah, the computer's only going off of the
This is
information it
just
has. It's
stupid.
only going off.
Now,
Yeah, yeah.
I grant you that if your job requires that you are that you have a license in a car, and the person says, "No, I don't have a license. I don't drive." You could say to them instantly, "Thank you so much. Let's stop this right now. And if you ever get a license, please come back and apply for this driver position." You could do that. Well,
Mhm.
and I say this in all fairness to so many companies out there that do not make technology work for them. They just are driven by the technology and do whatever it says. And that's a mistake. That's not recruiting, in my opinion. So he got pissed off. Mobley was pissed off.
As
He said, "Wait a
and this is
second,
something that
maybe
happens to a
it's
lot of
not
people.
humans
Yeah.
I'm dealing with. We're in this world of AI. Maybe it's the systems that are killing me, and this is wrong." All right. That's 3 years ago. He got a lawyer. And by the way, the man is black. He is disabled, and he's over 40. So fast forward 3 years to this March, and there was a judgment in March that that not only was there a reason perhaps to sue, and the case should go to court, but the case should be brought against the technology as opposed to an individual company, because there were hundreds, if you will, of companies that he interviewed with, and many of them were using Workday. And so Workday was basically sued.
Because they're the biggest.
And at the time, and this was in March or April, when that judgment came out, it was decided to go forward with age discrimination, and that it would be a class action suit. And everybody went, "What? What do you mean class action suit?" And suddenly there's a whole new world that might get involved. Because when you're dealing with a class action suit against Workday, you have to ask the question, how many clients do they have? Well, they have thousands. How many people have applied to a Workday client in the last 5 years? The number is hundreds of millions of people. More people than there are people in in this country. So that means obviously there's a lot of people who applied to a lot of different jobs. So this is fascinating, because now Workday's going, "This is impossible. What do you mean class action suit against us, for God's sake?" Well, there's a lot of conversation that took place between April and May of 2025 and today, where we are in December. But along the way, during the summer, some decisions were made in terms of how this would play out. And up until about September, there were a series of decisions made in which Workday was going to be required to build a website and drive tens of millions of job seekers to that website. And they would then be asked the following questions. They would say, did you apply to any of these companies? These companies being clients of Workday that are using their matching algorithm, AI or not, or Hired Score, which they had acquired, which is part of Workday.
Mhm.
So that would be question number one. And if you're the CEO of any one of those thousands of companies, that would really kind of irritate you if that became public, because you'd be asking your CHRO a lot of interesting questions. So that's the first question. The second question is, when you applied, were you over 40? And the third question is, were were you were you rejected? And the fourth question is, do you believe that you might have been rejected because of your age? And if you
Sure.
answer those four questions, you too can be part of this class action suit. So there was a rapid set of things up to about September, the end of September, in which the only thing that was missing was the set of advertisements that would then be published in things like the Wall Street Journal, LinkedIn, on Indeed. It's set in all these different places that would say, hey, if you are over 40 and may have applied to a bunch of different companies that are using Workday's tools, go to this website and answer the questions. So that's what I spoke about at RecFest at that time, which was around the end of September. I mean, it was in October, so it was pretty current. Now, since then, what has happened is that the plaintiffs, that's Mobley, have come back and said we should expand this to include people who may be disabled, people who are diverse, etc. And that's being discussed now. So that may delay this whole thing.
Yeah, because it's not just over
or
40.
the judge might go, nah, let's stick with one thing and deal with that. So I don't know the answer. If they start to include more, now you're talking about, I don't know, even higher numbers than hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, this is almost let's just say almost everybody can sign up to
everybody
be.
who applied to any company that was part of Workday would be on the hook, to basically find and tell everybody who had applied to go to this website and answer these questions. So, I just don't think it could take another couple of years to make that all happen. It could be shortened, and that's what I think may happen. So we might see something in 2026, maybe even early in 2026. And what you should be doing if you're in HR or TA is follow this. And that means getting online, Googling, Mobley versus, et cetera, and paying attention to this, because when it does hit, whether it's now or in the future, it's going to change things significantly. Let me tell you how. It means that technology is going to be as accountable as the companies for mistakes. And when it's technology, it means that the scale might be huge from a class action suit, which also means much more public. Right now, tens of millions of dollars of penalties for mistakes that employers make because of a bias of a given hiring manager that comes to light, or a recruiter that screws up that comes to light, gets gets handled by lawyers behind the scenes, and we're talking tens of millions of dollars. But now we may be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars or more, and it being very public in terms of identifying and naming companies, whether or not they may be found guilty, whether or not
Yep.
they may be found guilty. And that's the point. It's about, here's a potential problem. It's going to court. And do you want to be part of this? And the CEOs, the heads of HR are going to be concerned about those issues. Now, technology, especially with AI, is being used potentially to decide who gets promoted.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets equitable pay, and how that changes.
This opens up questions for
It
everything.
opens up who gets laid off. You know, if you ask ChatGPT, here's a list of all of our members, all of our employees, and what they do, and we need to cut 10% out. Which do you think we should be doing? You know, we're
It
going
almost
to be in
removes
an
that
era
layer.
when we're going to use the tools that are there. We're going to obviously make sure that we audit them, that we deal with that. But when that starts to happen, we're going to have to defend the pushback. And if we do some stupid things like forgetting how to configure the ATS to respond a day later instead of a minute later, we're going to find that we're going to create problems for ourselves, and resolving those problems can be very painful, even if we were innocent in relation to it. So what I predict happening is, when this takes place, and even before, we should be working on this now. This should help us think about what do I want to transform talent acquisition in to be, to be focused. But HR is going to have to look at the other piece. But when I'm looking at my operations group, I'm got to pivot that operations group to be much more of a quality control operation that looks at what we're automating, looks at our new approaches to how we engage, select, screen, and make decisions about candidates. Somebody's going to have to audit that from a quality control point of view, and the skills and knowledge that should be applied to that would be really some of the very best recruiters that we have, who can oversee and understand what is or should be going on. The kind of data from an analytics point of view that suggests that maybe there's hiring managers out there that constantly have qualified, diverse slates and never select the diverse candidates, etc. And it's
Yep.
going to be that kind of ongoing quality control and our ability to transform the organization to ensure that what we're doing is fair and that we are transparent about that, because a lot of that data, now that we have all of this capability and all of this data, that's all discoverable.
Now, I think you mentioned that. So Workday's stance is probably, it's not the technology; it's the person implementing.
Yeah. Except when you're dealing with the fact that you've configured this to operate in a particular way, and you have the ability to configure it however you want it. So I will tell you that it's a no-brainer to me, where we will no longer be, as employers, the only one who can be sued. The technology and tools will be part of that. And so we're going to have to be much more responsible in how we dig in to those technology tools that we've added to our tech stack and make sure that we audit all of that. And that way we can defend as humans, we're going to be able to defend that we have done what is fair. In the case of Workday, Workday made a huge number of claims that when you started to automate, it was operating on its algorithm to help you decide which were the best people to see. And so a lot of companies simply bought that without necessarily taking the responsibility for understanding what that algorithm actually was doing.
Hmm.
And keep in mind, almost all of these approaches from an AI point of view are proprietary. So there's levels of knowledge that we don't really get as the employer, but we can be asking the vendor, for example, if they test their tools that they're making claims about through some kind of independent source,
Yep.
meet various ISO standards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a responsibility to do those things. The vendors have a responsibility to make sure that their claims match what the outcomes are. And in the future, I think the court cases will involve both the technology and the employer, and the court will have to decide how to weight the penalty if they're found guilty, and if they're found innocent, fine.
Yeah, I can't see this being in Mobley's favor. I mean, I could see a part of it maybe, but I just like you make that decision that this is what's actually happening. This is this trickles down to all sorts of different things.
Oh, without a doubt.
So I
And
I
and
don't know how they solve this.
and Mike, here's another piece to this. We're very sensitive to issues related to race and gender, for example. But I doubt very much if any company has collected or has bothered to infer whether or not a given role included a pool of talent that was qualified, that was over 40, and what that percentage was, and how often somebody over 40 was actually selected.
But
We
isn't that a
don't do
catch
that. We do
22?
that for gender. We do that for race. But we're not, most companies aren't researching internally what they're doing in terms of qualified folks over 40 who are a protected class. And so I have a feeling that that there could be some mistakes out there.
Yeah, it's just I don't I mean, so, when you recruit, you want everything to be blind, right? Like you use all these tools to make the resume look blind. It's just the skills and whatnot. Now it's a catch 22
But
because
it's
now you
not,
have to make
but
sure
yeah,
that
it's blind, but it's not blind.
yeah,
And to
it's
my
like
way of thinking, I don't believe in it being blind. Okay, I believe it being fair. So I do believe that every recruiter should know whether or not their pool of qualified candidates is in fact diverse. If you're looking for a mechanical engineer and there's 50 people who applied and none are women, when 12% in fact of mechanical engineers are women, then you should be spending a little more effort going to the Society of Women Engineers or et cetera,
mhm.
any of the things that we do as recruiters to ensure that we have a diverse qualified pool from which we can draw qualified candidates, some of which are diverse, so that the hiring manager, obviously over time, helps to move the needle for the company, so that so that you have some representation that's legitimate in relation to their presence in our society. Otherwise, you're demonstrating institutional exclusion. That
Mhm.
was the intent of some of the civil rights work that still is in force. So lawyers don't want the recruiters knowing all of that data, because obviously they have to then defend the outcomes. But, you know, in most large companies are committed to doing the right thing. And by empowering recruiters with more data, they're in a position to influence, if you will, the hiring manager in doing the right thing as well. And therein lies some of the choke points that exist out there.
This looks like a massive headache that's going.
I think it's fascinating. Um, the only reason I'm still in all of this is I started, 50 years ago when this was new. and
Yeah.
in 50 years we've come a long way. I would tell you that there was very little unconscious bias in the 1960s and 70s.
No, it was conscious.
It was very conscious. And folks like myself who were involved in recruiting, we weren't talking to people who didn't know that they were not hiring women, for example. They didn't want to hire women, and they told you clearly, don't give me any candidates who are women. And then you're in a position then to help them better understand that regardless of what they think, they need to act differently. And if not, this is not the company they should be in. Period. And you had to have bosses who backed you up on that as well. So we've come a long, long way. And we're at a point where we have, with the exception of some of our political problems, we're doing some really good work, and a lot of companies are stepping up to continue to do some good work in relation to us looking, and as employers, more like the society that we are in. And so fundamentally, I think we need to continue to step up and do the right thing. And technology now is part of how we can expand our abilities, but it's also a potential problem for us. So we're going to learn.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating case.
It is.
Because the gentleman could not have had the right skills or whatnot, but optics don't lie. And so like he applied and immediately gets the rejection, and
Yeah,
sitting there,
it wasn't
you know,
just that. It was the fact that he was pretty confident that he has competitive skills, and he was just losing out over and over and over. And the quality of how he's being rejected just continued to disrespect him from his perspective. And so that probably generated most of the angst that allowed him to get a lawyer. And now it's in a court to adjudicate if in fact the facts support that. And so we don't know what the answer is. There's a lot of good reason to believe that in the end, it may not have been intentional in any way, shape, or form. It could have been just stupid things that are built into the system. But we'll find out.
I think there's a little bit of it being a really hard time to find a job in the last 5
And
years.
yes,
I think
there's that.
and it is very frustrating when you put in the effort to go through an application process like Workday's, which is not easy. It might be easier with the acquisition of Paradox, but to go through that horrible experience and then immediately you get like it's frustrating. I've heard of people like, so you see posts on LinkedIn and on Reddit and stuff. All these people be like, I just got a job finally after all this time. It's like thousands of
Right.
applications, like thousands of interviews, and it's bleak. It's bleak. So if
I
this makes things better, great.
yeah, the numbers are not good, and the expectation of somebody who's out is that they should get a job within a few months, and it's now taking many months, and into a year of hard work, to get to get that next job, and it's always not always the best next job either. So I feel for a lot of the folks out there who are looking. I think that as recruiters and recruiting systems, we should find some time, energy, and effort on our part to try to help folks. And I think a lot of recruiters do. And so I appreciate the effort our industry makes, to help folks get their act together so that they can put their best foot forward and compete effectively. Um, and we'll see what happens in the future. Obviously, one
Well,
of the
we're
problems right now is you've increased the number of applications on average for many of these roles from, let's say, 100, to now 3, 4, 500 people. So just there you have an issue. And then the inference of which of those really deserve to go forward is colored a little bit because so many of those folks who applied used AI themselves to put their best foot forward. So now you're using technology to infer, who is the best candidate, but you're really looking at technology that has, colored, if you will, that information in a way that makes it more difficult. And there's that old um, phrase that, garbage in equals garbage out. We
yep.
really need to go back to, because I have a feeling we as, an industry need to collect data a little bit differently at the top of the funnel.
Well, this is fascinating. I want to thank you for joining me on Totally Talent, Gerry.
My
I
pleasure.
hope you have a wonderful holiday season. This probably will go out after the holiday break. But thank you for shedding some light on this, and thanks for all the work that you do for recruiters.
My
Thanks for tuning in to the Totally Talent podcast by HR.com. We hope you find today's episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to explore more episodes and discover valuable resources at hr.com/podcasts, where you can listen to all of our podcasts. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and making a difference in the world of talent.